Okay, here we are. Here we are again. Good evening, good morning, good whatever it might be where you are. I'm Tad. Good to see you. Had having a bit of a tough weekend for various reasons I won't bore you with or detail for you, but also worrying about some friends of mine who are going through tough times too. So, just saying that off the top, just if my energy level seems a little low tonight, that's why, but not anything to do with being here and reading to you guys. So, that will go on business as usual. TCB, baby, TCB. If you don't know what that means, again, there's so many references. I now wonder. My kids actually get upset with me because they're like, "I already knew that," and I'm like, "How was I supposed to know?" Half the time I say these things, and you guys look at me like I'm speaking Martian. TCB, taking care of business. That was a ring that Elvis had. It was particularly sad because he died on the toilet. But anyway, there you go. That's the kind of mood I'm in tonight. I hope you guys are willing to roll with it. What else did I want to talk to you about? It's been actually an interesting week because we've finally been getting rain here in California, and we're desperate for it. So although the dogs hate it, especially the big dog who hates weather, hates change, hates noise, hates anything that catches him off balance or is a change from what he's expecting. He also runs every time we open the pantry closet for fear that boxes will fall out, as they occasionally do, although I don't think any of them has ever landed on John. Um, but he's positive that one of these days there will be a box of Nature Valley granola bars that has his name on it, I guess. Anyway, so other than John in particular being more worried about it than the rest of us are. The rest of us are actually quite happy, of course, because we desperately need rain. This is not an unusual occurrence in California. We had an 8-year drought at one stretch, I remember, before it ended in an El Nino, which washed away half the hill behind the house where we were living at the time. So but that's not what's going on right now. It just was a normal, and still is actually. It's raining outside even as I speak. This is a normal thing. This is a good thing, and we are very glad. The last time I went by our local reservoir, which is kind of up near the top, not the top. It's actually at the bottom of the hills, but it's before you descend down into Silicon Valley. And the last time I was past that thing, it was dang near bone dry. It was really, really low. So this is good. About this, I am in a good mood. What else am I in a good mood about? Oh, well, got this just the other day, which is, as you can see, Brothers of the Wind, which means it's going out to stores and things like that. I'm not showing this to you guys like, oh, and I really want you to buy this because most of you are probably Tad readers and will probably get them anyway. But I am happy that the book is out, and I'm happy that the story goes forward while I have to work on other things. In other news, what? I'm still getting these little too low FPS things that I literally cannot figure out how to fix. Every time I go on, and go Google, what does this mean and how do I fix it, or some variant thereof, I basically get instructions that don't have anything to do with what's actually in front of me or what actual buttons I have access to or what actual subroutines on the apps I'm using actually work. So I'm thinking more and more about moving to YouTube. I will obviously let you know before that happens, and I would continue as I do now. I post the URL for this on my other social media as well. So I would obviously still be coming here to post, a link to wherever it is I'm doing the live reading. But anyway, so just wanted to let you know on that. It's still an issue. I'm still irritated. Every time I turn around, they change something. And I swear to God, I'm not one of those like old people who's all cranky about technology. I actually worked at Apple Computer for a number of years. I've been an early adopter of a lot of kinds of technology. I've been working on a word processor since the middle of the 1980s or earlier. Yeah, even earlier. So I'm totally down with technology and everything it can do for me. But I am finding this particularly bizarre set of things a bit irritating. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, what else? Anything else I wanted to mention? I mentioned the book. I mentioned the rain. I mentioned the scared dog. Poor guy. I think that's about it, and just, sending strength and love out to people I know who are going through some tough times. And anybody who wants to is welcome to send it back to me. Not that I'm having a particularly bad time, but it was a bit of a rough weekend for various, as I said, various reasons. So all of that is all of that. So don't really have anything else to say on those subjects. I'm working. I'm working every day. I literally, this is my life now, especially and for the next 6 months or so, or however long it takes me to finish the books. It's 7 days a week. It's 24. Well, it's not 24/7, obviously, but it's pretty much every day. So as long as I just want you all to know that I take my responsibilities very seriously. I am not one of those writers who is going to just stop writing. I will finish my stories, and I will finish any story that I am physically able to finish. And I'm certainly going to finish these stories because I'm in good health. I'm relatively robust. And, I'm really into the story. So, I want to make it work. So, anyway, let me check in and see who's here in the magic mirror wanting to talk to us. Romper, Stomper, Bomper, Boo, or whatever it is that Miss Nancy used to say. So who have we got? We've got Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie. Good morning. James, good to see you, bud. What's up with you? Oh, excuse me. What up? What up, yo? And Mark, good morning. Morning to you. Morning to everybody. Ilva, your parents are late, so time to say hi. Well, thank you for that, dear. I'm sorry we changed because several other people said it would be fine to change. We'll have to work something out in the long run, but I'm sorry to hear it, but do give your folks my love. Kristen, hello, Kristen. Good to see you. Cliff, good morning. It's raining in San Jose. Yay, we need it. We need it. We need it. So I'm glad. San Jose, for those of you who are in another country, San Jose is just over the hill from where we live in the Santa Cruz area. So if it's raining in San Jose, that's good too. We need water everywhere the heck all over the California and probably other parts of the West. Steve Gurr, hello, good to see you. Hazel, good morning, sweetie. How you doing, mama? That Hazel is my mother-in-law. Hazel is Deb's mom, and so it's always lovely to hear from you. And good to see you. I hope everybody's well on that end. Christina, hello, good morning. Petra also says hi. She's busy this morning. Oh, dear me. Petra. You have disappointed me. I'm sorry. That's bad news. No, it's not. Have a good morning wherever you are, Petra. And Christina, good to see you. Jeremy, hello. Good to see you too, buddy. Holger, good morning. Guten Morgen. Back from bringing home the bread. And greetings from Waldesruhe. So greetings back to you in cold but very sunny Waldesruhe. Dirk, hello. And good morning in Berlin. And oh yeah. Kristen's remembering the drought. Yes, and the storm that knocked out the power. Oh, I'm not sure about that one. I mean, not that I just don't remember specifically, but yeah, I mean, it's always exciting. Suzanne, good morning from Yorkshire. Lovely to have Yorkshire represented. Rosalba, a pleasure as always. Jessica, hello, good to see you too. I'm very glad you are here. So, now, what are we doing? We're going to read in just a minute. Was there anything else that I needed to talk about first? Not really, no. So I won't bore you with any more of my meandering, maundering thoughts. I will tell you one thing, which is that it's hard to tell sometimes. I spend so much time thinking about the books and thinking about the complexity of the plots and how they all interlink, and my obsession with making sure all plot lines and all major characters get some kind of an arc of their own and some kind of resolution. I actually just wrote a letter to the mailing list about this. But it's really fascinating because I've been living with this so much since 2014 that it's like my mind has a gear that it automatically shifts into whenever I'm not actively engaged in doing something else. You know, if I lie down, if I take a nap, if I'm getting ready to go to bed at night, sometimes if I'm just sitting, after having done something and, I'm just trying to have a few minutes of quiet afterwards or something, and this stuff just goes back in. Because it's all jiggly. It's all arranging things. And the when I say plot lines, that suggests that they are, like singular things, and that they're two dimensional, that they have a single line that describes them. And in fact, plot lines aren't anything like that at all until they've been written. Before they've been written, at least speaking for myself, plot lines are these weird kind of hydra-like things, like some kind of really weird undersea creature that they're solid up until the point where you're coming up with what happens next, and then they just suddenly branch out into 100 or 1,000 different tendrils that could be. And so when you're working with plot lines, you're not working with like a bunch of roads that already exist. You're working with these nebulous, squishy, almost ephemeral things that could be any number of possibilities. And in fact, the number of possibilities is not finite. It's literally infinite. I mean, obviously we try and keep our plot possibilities down to a certain manageable number of likely things. Yes, it's possible at any time that Simon and Benedict will suddenly hop on a spaceship and travel to another dimension and meet the Moon Men or something. That's obviously not a very likely one. So I don't spend a lot of time considering that. Somebody might travel to the future and get a job working at Arby's. Well, yeah, there's always possible things that you kind of throw away to begin with. But within the context of writing a complex multi-volume story with literally dozens of plot lines and many dozens of interacting characters, they are everything is kind of in transition at all times from the point where you've already written. And even when you're in the earlier drafts, even the things you've already written are kind of, again, they're not ephemeral. They begin to have some reality, but you also know you can change them if you come across something you want to do later on that is contradicted by those. So it's all super fuzzy. It's very quantum. And that's one of the things I love about it, but it's also one of the reasons that, sometimes I'm dying to get to the end of a book. Not because I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, but because I want to have my brain back for at least a little while. Unfortunately, with me, that never lasts very long. And immediately I'm thinking of new things I want to write. And immediately these, things are starting to sprout, these kind of tuberous bulbs that then start to sprout leaves and sprouts and shoots and things like that could be this or could be that. And that's great fun, but it's also, it's why I can't enjoy time off very much. But it is nice to make the transition and at least be able to start a new one. So whatever I write next, much as I will miss the storylines I'm writing and may want to go back to someday, at the same time, I will also be relieved to be able to disconnect that bunch of possibilities that's constantly throbbing in my head and at least start over with something that at the early stages is a bit more simple and is a bit more pure in terms of how you think about it. You can start thinking about it in very broad ways and try things and then completely throw them out. Whereas once you're well into a book, you can't throw stuff away. You're committed. It's down. In my case, it's already been published. So even if I suddenly went, the character, in this book or something, it's like, I'm not really all that crazy about Patience Needle. I don't think she's a great villain. I think it's like, I've already published the first volume. I can't go back and throw it away. So if there's something wrong with a character or a plot line, which by the way, I don't mean that specifically as a problem here. It's not. I just used it as an example because we're reading the book. But if a plot line or a character is problematic, I cannot toss them out when I'm in the middle of a story. I must try to figure out why isn't it working, at least for me, and what is it that I need to do to make it work better. And that's, that's it's actually work. It's actually work. Not that I'm complaining, because, work is what we do so that we can eat and have a roof over our heads when it's raining outside. Anyway, so we're going back to we were in the middle. Well, yeah, we were sort of in the middle of a chapter called Humpty Dumpty's Hanky. And what it was about is that Ragnar, Mr. Walkwell, I believe, and Gideon have gone into town, and Colin has gone with them, Colin Needle. And what they don't know is that he is having a secret meeting with Jude Modesto, who is an antiques dealer who we learn in that first half of that section has been getting artifacts from Gideon. And we see him with, a Greek vase. He's been getting artifacts from Gideon. We don't know where Gideon's got them, where they've come from, but Modesto seems to think they are a bequest from the late Octavio Tinker. But Colin has an entire agenda of his own. So he snuck away from the others, and he's gone to see Jude Modesto before Gideon meets with him. And he's essentially said, here's a little piece of something. You take that and have it analyzed, and then you email me and let me know that you're interested, and I'll tell you what it's going to cost you to get it. And just as he got to that point with Jude Modesto, Gideon and Ragnar showed up early. And that's where we are. That's where we are. So then I'm going to... No, there is one other part I read, which is that. And then in the middle of all this, it turns out that Colin is not the only person double dealing. Jude Modesto has called Ed Stillman, who is, as we will find out, who is Gideon's rival and enemy. And Ed Stillman has showed up in Jude Modesto's office. So that's what we're doing. Colin's hiding behind a screen, by the way, and now I'm finally going to start reading. Colin suddenly realized what was really at stake. These were bodyguards, armed bodyguards. If he made a suspicious noise, they would probably shoot him first and ask questions later. The urge to giggle suddenly felt much more like an urge to throw up. Colin clenched his teeth together violently. He didn't want to do either. Now, if everyone has finished demonstrating their toughness, Stillman said, perhaps we can talk business. Mr. Modesto, you are no longer needed. Wait in my car, please. The driver is running the engine and the air conditioning is on. I won't forget this, Gideon shouted as Modesto scuttled out like a crab trying to get back to its tide pool. Colin had another even more disturbing thought. This guy Stillman is Modesto's main buyer. He said so. He's some kind of enemy of Gideon's, and Modesto's going to give the piece of eggshell to Stillman. His insides felt cold and heavy. What had he done? And more important, what would happen if Gideon found out? At the very least, Colin and his mother would be thrown off the farm forever. The only thing he really cared about would be taken away from him. You can't keep me here, Stillman, Gideon snarled. You're scum, and I don't have anything to say to you. We're going to walk out now, and your hired thugs can't stop us. Stillman smiled and shook his head. Please, Gideon, if you won't talk to me, I can have police and FBI agents swarming all over your farm by nightfall. You really don't want that to happen, do you? Police? That's nonsense. Try me and find out. A hard silence filled the room. When Gideon finally spoke, he sounded like he had been punched in the stomach. What? What are you talking about? Oh, good. I have your attention, Stillman said. Sit down. Gideon sat. Ragnar returned. Gideon, my life has changed a great deal since I saw you last. I'm sure you've heard that my company, Mission Software, has now gone public. Gideon glared at him and did not answer. It made me a pretty penny. More than a few pretty pennies, in fact. Mission Software. Ed Stillman? Colin had heard of him. The man was a billionaire. But why on earth would someone like that know anything about their farm? If you just wanted to brag, Stillman, said Gideon, you could have sent a press release instead of holding us at gunpoint. Edward Stillman laughed. You're just as charming as ever. I don't see any guns out, do you? Now, listen carefully. You and I both know that by all rights, the farm should belong to me. It belongs to my family, not yours. If Octavio had been in his right mind, he would have made that clear before he died. Colin almost fell off his box again. This was crazy. Stillman and Gideon? Related? You're full of crap, spat Gideon, his face an angry red. You aren't even a tinker, said Stillman. You just married one. Stole one, to be more accurate, because Grace should have been mine. Don't you dare talk about her! Gideon's eyes were almost popping out of his head. Ragnar put a big hand on his shoulder to calm him, or perhaps to restrain him. Don't you dare say a word about my wife! Stillman shook his head. I'd hoped you would be more reasonable than this. You won't make a good impression in court, you know, with spit flying out of your mouth like that. He sighed. Well, it doesn't matter. I have no urge to make friends with you, Goldring. I just wanted to tell you that I'm going to get that farm. I know there's more going on there than simply Octavio's collection of antiques. My Uncle Octavio was a brilliant, brilliant man. The world underestimated him, but I haven't. He would have wanted me to have that farm and have access to his research. Gideon thrashed beneath Ragnar's restraining grip. Liar! You already tried to steal it from me with your blasted lawyers, but you lost. The farm is mine. You'll never get it. Stillman shook his head again, like a father watching a child throw a tantrum. Gideon, the only reason I'm warning you is that I would prefer to keep the police and FBI out of this. I don't want the authorities running loose on that farm any more than you do. I don't know what's there, but I do know I'd rather not share it with the federal government. But if I can't get the farm any other way, I'll let them have it before I'll let you have it. You little thief. And now it was Stillman who was starting to turn red beneath his deep tan. Do you understand me? One way or another, you're as good as gone. You can't do anything, Gideon said. You already lost once. Oh, but I can, said Stillman, because I discovered a letter that we didn't have the last time we went to trial. A letter from Grace. He grinned. He didn't look quite so much like a refined billionaire now. That's right. You only kept that farm because the law decided Grace disappeared after old Octavio died. But now I have a letter that makes it a lot clearer than about what really happened. Gideon suddenly looked very old. What? What are you talking about? What letter? Oh, I brought you a copy. Stillman gestured to one of the bodyguards, who produced a manila envelope and handed it to Gideon. She wrote to my mother a few days before she so conveniently vanished. You can see what she says, can't you? Gideon is getting more angry and desperate all the time, I believe she says. Also, I worry that there may be violence. It frightens me. Gideon frightens me. Dear me, that doesn't sound good, does it?
She didn't mean violent toward her, said Gideon. She was worried that I might lose my temper with with Octavio. Yes, yes, you will explain it to a jury, I'm sure. And we will all be fascinated to hear again how my sweet little cousin Grace, beautiful, kind Grace, just happened to run away on the night her grandfather died, leaving you the sole master of Octavio Tinker's property. How touching! How dramatic! How convenient! Gideon shoved the copy of the letter back into its envelope. I'll never give you a square inch of ordinary farm. Nothing. Not even a spoonful of dirt. Stillman shrugged. I'm bored with you now, Gideon. You're just as petty as you ever were. Don't you realize you can't win? He tipped his head toward his bodyguards. Come on, gentlemen. We have work to do. Lawsuits to file, murder investigations to reopen. You're bluffing, Gideon said. You want the farm too much yourself to risk getting the police involved again. Yes, you tell yourself that. Stillman stopped in the doorway. Oh, and remember this. You've only been surviving so far because I've been buying your antiques. I know your finances better than you do, and so far it's suited me to keep the farm in business. But if I decide not to buy any more of what is clearly my own family's legacy, and I pass the word among my collector friends for good measure that I caught you selling fakes, where are you going to find the money to run that place, let alone hire enough lawyers to keep me from getting it? He laughed and walked out. That scum! Colin could see Gideon's face through the crack. He looked as though he'd been beaten up. For a moment, despite years of dislike, Colin almost felt sorry for him. Is he really your wife's clansman? Asked Ragnar. He didn't seem very sympathetic to Gideon's position, although Colin always had trouble reading the Norseman. You did not tell me that. Why should I? What difference does it make? She's a liar. He's a liar. I had nothing to do with Grace disappearing. He looked at Ragnar, and his expression hardened. You're not questioning that, are you? You don't think I'd murder my wife, do you? I judge no man, Ragnar said. Thanks for that vote of support, Gideon said bitterly. Come on. We have to pick up the boy and go home. We promised him ice cream. I don't give a damn, said Gideon. Colin crouched silently until he heard them leaving, then went to the window and watched them get into the truck, Gideon moving like a very, very old man. It was only as he watched them drive away that he realized they would probably beat him back to the coffee shop and that Gideon's bad mood would get worse if they had to wait for him. They did, and it did. Colin didn't get any ice cream. Gideon and Ragnar looked like they'd just come from a funeral. The drive home was a very quiet one. And here is the next chapter. Whoops. Oops, the chapter is called, how do I get this thing? Oh, there we go. The chapter is called Ain't Going to Terry. Tarry. Ain't Going to Terry. Chapter 17. After dinner, Tyler knocked on his sister's door and actually waited until she said, "Come in," before bursting in. He ran to the window and drew the curtains while Lucinda watched, puzzled. "What's that about?" Tyler waved away the question. "So where's the book?" Lucinda pulled it out from under her mattress. She was curious, but not quite as worked up as her brother. While they had been taking care of the baby griffins with Ragnar, Tyler had just kept hopping from foot to foot as if he had to use the bathroom. Badly. "Let me look," he said. "Now, come on, I found it." "Bugger. We both found it. Besides, it's hard to find anything left to read. She leafed through a few pages. Chewed page confetti rolled out in little showers. The mice have eaten almost all of it. Here, let me see. But instead of snatching it, he waited until she put it in his hands, then carefully pushed the shredded pages apart. Look, here's some bits in the middle that they didn't get. Really weird old handwriting. He spread a page as flat as he could and began to read out loud. But here's my question. Why must we think of it as simply a fourth dimension? Perhaps it would be more instructive to consider it as akin to Earth's terramagnetic field, as something that surrounds and permeates the dimensions we perceive, rather than being simply one more dimension. At the places of intersection, the lines of force would cohere, much as the lines of an electromagnetic pole cohere, albeit invisibly, and influence physics in our three known dimensions and perhaps beyond them. If so, then the structure of the breach itself might be something familiar to most scientists. A Fibonacci spiral. This breach, as I named it in the first of these journals, or fault line, as I have begun to call it since setting my sights on California as the most propitious spot for prospecting, has now become my central obsession. Fault is by way of a small jest, since the earth of America's western coast is rotten with faults of the seismic variety, coupled with the fact that several people have suggested my fascination with this line of study is a bit of a fault. Man, it just goes on like this, Tyler grumbled. Old Octavio has a totally bad case of can't talk normal English. Do you want me to read it instead? No. If it does take the form of a Fibonacci spiral, there would not only be a point of intersection with physical space, but at that intersection would be found areas of greater concentration of what is currently thought to be a single medium of unchanging density. The fourth dimension expressed as a cohered monopole at the center of a fifth dimensional rolling vortex. That is to say, at the heart of the infolding, there would be a place where a near infinite expression of that medium would be located in a very small part of our four-dimensional matrix. Would that not be a very merry thing to find? In any case, father and mother are both quite put out with these kinds of maunderings, as father puts it, and forbid me from such research until at least the time when I have received a doctorate and may pursue knowledge without the shame of being perceived a crackpot. Man, this guy is the mayor of Mad Scientist Town, said Tyler, laughing. But what does it all mean? Lucinda asked. What's a fourth dimension? How should I know? In my science class, we learned how to make a rocket out of a plastic soda bottle. Tyler riffled through the pages of the ruined notebook. That's about all there is left to read, just a few words and sentences here and there, and some math stuff. The only thing for certain is that he's saying there's an earlier diary, and if old Octavio's the kind of guy who keeps diaries, there might be a whole bunch of them stashed away somewhere and not eaten by mice. Tyler handed her back the notebook. Hide it again. If there are more, I'm going to find them. If anybody's going to tell us what's going on with this place, it's the guy who built it. Something fell against the window. Both Tyler and Lucinda jumped. Suddenly frightened, Lucinda shoved the diary under her pillow. Tyler went to the window and pulled back the curtain. I knew it was right. I knew I was right, he said. I knew it. Look outside, Luce. Lucinda stood up and stared out the window. The cherry tree filled much of her view, its blossoms gone and the leaves turning purple-brown. What do you see? He asked. Just the usual stuff. Okay, stand there and watch for a minute. Tyler clattered out of the room and down the stairs. Lucinda shook her head. What was it now? More ghosts? Tree ghosts? Mid-afternoon tree ghosts? Tyler appeared a few moments later in the overgrown patch of dry grass under the window. He stood there for a moment, then started walking in the direction of the library and the rest of the unused wing, without even looking back. Lucinda reached up to tap on the glass to get his attention, but before she could do it, something dark hopped onto a branch high above Tyler's head. It squatted for a moment, fat as a toad and just as still, then jumped effortlessly to the next tree. It was following him. Tyler turned around suddenly, heading back again toward the kitchen and dining room. The black squirrel followed, changing direction itself a few moments after he did. Lucinda felt a sudden surge of panic. Although it seemed ridiculous, what could a squirrel, even a big one, do to a boy Tyler's size? Still, she couldn't help pulling up the window to warn him. Tyler! He didn't turn, but the squirrel did, fixing her with the queasy yellow of its stare. For a moment she felt sure the animal was truly looking at her, as if marking her for future attention. She swallowed hard and rattled the windows back down. Her brother and his hopping pursuer vanished from sight. Tyler came back into the room a short while later. Did you see? That creepy squirrel again. And it was following you. Yeah, duh. It's been doing it for days. Everywhere I go unless I'm out with the farm people. Even then, I keep thinking I see it hiding up in the trees watching. And it keeps Zaza away. I hardly ever see her now. What's going on? Why would it do that? She felt suddenly chilly, as if she had a fever. Those eyes. I don't know. It started when I found the library. I think somebody's using it to keep an eye on me. You were going to say Mrs. Needle. Yeah, well, she creeps me out. I think she's a witch or something. Tyler Jenkins, do you hear yourself? A witch? This isn't one of your video games. And it isn't one of your we're all friends, everybody learns a lesson, then we all hug TV shows either. There's some creepy stuff going on around here, and I'm not just talking about dragons and hoop snakes. Lucinda sat down on the bed, too tired to argue. She didn't want Mrs. Needle to be bad. She didn't care if everybody hugged, but she did need friends. She was lonely with only her brother for a friend. She wasn't used to it. Look, just do me a favor, he said. I want you to go to that library and see if you can find any more of Octavio's notebook. If I go, that thing is going to follow me, and somebody is going to know about it. The library where Tyler said he'd seen a ghost? She absolutely did not want to do that. How do you know it won't just follow me? Because I'm going to take Secret Squirrel for a little walk around the property. Lucinda never really said yes, but she didn't say no forcefully enough to stop him either. She watched from her window as Tyler wandered past, looking around like a little kid playing army spy, trying to convince the squirrel he was doing something secret and important, she guessed. She was too nervous to be disgusted. And maybe, just maybe, Tyler was right, because within a few seconds the black squirrel reappeared, then waited until Tyler had rounded the corner and headed out toward the front of the house before it hopped after him, its weight making even some of the bigger branches bounce and sway. Lucinda forced herself to follow her brother out of the house, but headed in the opposite direction. She didn't look up for fear of what she might see, but once she heard a rattling noise above her head that froze her in her tracks. She stayed that way for long seconds, heart beating, breathless, until a blue jay squawked loudly and flew away past her, and the trees were silent again. More silence and dust greeted her inside the library. In the fading evening light slanting in through the big windows, she could see the footprints she and Tyler had left during their last visit. Or at least she hoped that's who had left them. The place was half in shadows and extremely creepy, but Lucinda was afraid to turn the lights on in case someone at the house should notice. Why didn't I bring a flashlight? She had to admit it. Tyler was better at this ninja spy stuff than she was. Her footsteps made little smacking noises as she crossed the library to the picture of Octavio Tinker. What was that thing in his hand, that weird brass tangle of curves and wheels? Why was it the brightest thing in the picture? The old man's eyes seemed to sparkle with self-regard. I know, and you don't. He must have been as hard to put up with as Uncle Gideon. Lucinda knew she should investigate the little room with the mirror. After all, that was where the other piece of journal had been found, but she honestly didn't know whether or not she could walk into a place that Tyler said was haunted. Instead, she stalled by exploring the rows and rows of books. A lot of the library was shelved in alphabetical order by subject. She found nothing under Ordinary Farm, although that seemed a little too obvious anyway. But she looked under Tinker and actually found a book about Octavio, titled Octavio Tinker, the Crystal Prophet. Her excitement faded a little when she saw that it was some sort of biography written for kids. A book at least 60 years old with corny-looking black and white photos and lots of weird diagrams. Still, she took it off the shelf. It might not be old Octavio's journal, but it was something. She wandered up and down the aisles, scanning the shelves of books and trailing her fingers across their dusty spines. None of the volumes seemed to be newer than decades old, and none of them looked obviously like a journal, although it would take her years to open them all and make sure. She was about to give up when something caught her eye. Standard Valley. There were at least a half dozen books in a row with those words on the cover. She pulled them from the shelf, tried to swipe the dust from the floor so she could sit, then realized it was hopeless and took them back to the chairs near the front of the building. 3 of them were stapled piles of paper. Yokutt County phone books, in parentheses, containing Canning, Standard Valley, Tent Pole, and Harper's Creek. There were no listings for Tinker or Ordinary Farm in any of them, so she put them aside. Another was a hardbound book from some organization called the California Grange, titled Yokutt County Grange, followed by a list of nearby towns, each one with a number, one of which was Standard Valley, number 723. She leafed through it, but it was just some kind of farming thing with information about water rights and who to contact in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. about various farming problems. She flipped it onto the pile with the phone books. The last one didn't look any more interesting than the others. Something titled Building Allotments and Land Surveys of Standard Valley, 1963. But it fell open right to a page titled Property, O. Tinker, a sort of blueprint drawing of buildings and other things. Even as she stared at it, something like a cool breeze whispered down the stacks, ruffling her hair and making her gasp. She looked around in surprise, but the library was empty and all the windows she could see were closed. Lucinda hurriedly shelved the other books, but held on to the land surveys. Then she took a deep breath as she walked back across the library to the door between the shelves, Tyler's haunted mirror room. The key was still in the lock. After the chilly visitation she had just experienced, her brother's talk of ghosts seemed more meaningful than before. She really didn't want to go in. Still, as she turned and saw old Octavio's painted, half-amused eyes on her, she knew she didn't want to just walk out either. This was a mystery. This was an adventure. She reminded herself of all the brave heroines in the books she'd read, took one more breath, and walked in, the book clutched to her chest like armor. It doesn't feel any more haunted than the rest of the library, she told herself. It was just old and dusty and probably spidery. She forced herself forward. Like it or not, she'd have to pull out all the dresser drawers and see if anything had fallen down behind them. She should probably look under the bed as well, the horrible cobwebby bed. She stopped, staring into the mirror. No one looked back but herself, so for a moment she didn't even understand why she felt so alarmed. Then she saw that on the wall in the mirror room, somebody had written a word in the dust. O-L-I-S. Olis. She turned, hoping that the strange word would be there too in the real room, that it was just some stupid thing her brother had traced on the wall. But it wasn't. The strange word only existed in the mirror. Lucinda didn't stop running until she was back in the overgrown garden. The sun was going down and a little wind had sprung up, but this time the cooling breezes of the outside world were welcome. She was walking along toward the kitchen door in the growing dark when a tall figure stepped out of the shadows, startling her so that she almost dropped the book clutched to her chest. "What are you doing, Missy?" It was Caesar, the man who brought Gideon his trays and who helped out around the house. He looked at her with concern. "You look like you've seen a haunt." She actually laughed. He didn't know how right he was. Or maybe he did. She didn't know and she didn't care. She was sick of mysteries and just wanted to get into her room and pull the blankets over her. I'm okay." "Didn't mean to scare you. Just taking the old vegetables and such out to the compost heap." He showed her the bag in his hand. "What you doing running around in the nearly dark?" "Just exploring." He shook his head. "This not the best place to go exploring after dark. Suppose they already told you that." "Everybody told us that, but they won't tell us why." He gave her a strange look. "And you and your brother all bound and determined to find out, huh?" He shook his head again slowly, as though he couldn't quite bring himself to believe it. He bent down until his dark, broad face was at the same level as her own. His breath smelled like cinnamon. "Look here," he whispered. "I'll tell you this for free. You seen the best part. You seen the animals, them unicorns and all. Now go on home. There's other things happen here ain't so nice, not so pretty. You and your brother too young to get tangled up in this kind of nonsense. That old man and his crazy notions. And we've had some bad people here too. You go on home." "What?" she asked as he straightened up. "What do you mean?" "You heard me," he said quietly as he walked past her, headed for the vegetable garden. When he spoke again, it was in a normal tone, a little loud even, as though someone else might be listening. "You have a nice evening now, Missy." As he vanished into the gloom, he was singing a slow song Lucinda didn't recognize. "The big bells tolling in Galilee ain't gonna tarry here. Oh, Lord, ain't gonna tarry here." And we have time to read a little bit more. So this one is, let me figure that out again. Chapter 18, entitled A Hole in the World. Ragnar appeared at breakfast and announced to everyone in the kitchen, I have news, but it is not very good, I'm afraid. Alamu found his way into the sick barn and took the unhatched egg. Now we will not be able to study it to learn what went wrong. Oh no! Lucinda looked really upset. Tyler usually teased her about her obsession with cute little baby animals. She loved any nature program with tiger or bear or lion cubs. But he felt the sadness too. These were the only dragons in the world, after all. If they couldn't reproduce, they would also be the last. When did it happen? He asked Ragnar. In the dawn. He fooled us, for he usually sleeps until the sun is high. Haneb saw him flying away with it in his mouth. Colin Needle had just walked into the room. That's terrible news, he said, then began filling his plate. The rest of July was hurrying past in a round of daily chores and other, even less satisfying activities. Tyler felt more frustrated than ever. Mysteries bloomed around every corner, but answers were a lot less common. Uncle Gideon was barely to be seen. The people in the kitchen, who seemed to know pretty much most of what went on at Ordinary Farm, said he stayed locked up in his study day and night, performing experiments of some kind with Mrs. Needle. It meant a lot of extra work for Ragnar and Mr. Walkwell. One evening Tyler ran into his great-uncle wandering alone in Mrs. Needle's vegetable garden, distracted and apparently confused. When Tyler said hello, the old man looked at him as if he didn't know who Tyler was. Was he ill? Crazy? Whatever the case, it made Tyler nervous. Worst of all, though, every time Tyler went outside the house on his own, the black squirrel followed him, ignoring both his shouts of protest and his attempts to shake it out of the trees. Even when he threw rocks at it, the squirrel scarcely reacted. If a stone came too close, it moved just far enough to avoid being hit. But other than that, it seemed completely unafraid. Tyler knew he was being watched, but by whom exactly and why? Who could make a squirrel do something like that anyway? Prevented from exploring, Tyler devoted his afternoons and evenings to studying the few fragments about Ordinary Farm he had collected. Octavio Tinker's mouse-gnawed journal, the children's book, and the book of surveys Lucinda had brought back from the library and passed to him with shaking hands. Lucinda's ghost message, Olis, O-L-I-S, wasn't in the dictionary, and Tyler had combed the shredded pages of Octavio's diary for any mention of Olis there, but with no luck. Another mystery. The children's book told him a little about Octavio Tinker's early life. Born at the end of the 19th century in upstate New York, Octavio was a brilliant man who had been a pioneer in the science of crystals and had become famous enough for a children's book to be published anyway, for growing at very high speeds huge crystals that looked like diamonds and other jewels. He had demonstrated this technique all over the world. There was even a picture of him growing some crystals for President Franklin Roosevelt. But the picture that really got Tyler's attention was one labeled Professor Tinker and His Continuum Scope. The device he was holding in the photo looked very much like the one in the painting, except bigger. Octavio, sporting a very impressive mustache, looked like he was about to play a solo on the French horn. So it was a real thing, after all, something he'd actually invented. After skimming the rest of the kids' book, Tyler put it down and went back to the journal. An hour later, he had puzzled out a few more smeared or torn words and phrases, including scientific-looking terms like crystallometry, Fulcanelli's cross, flux growth, covalent bonding, and node of pure graylite. But none of them meant anything to him at all. After checking the dictionary, he suspected some of them might not even mean anything to his science teachers. But he also pried apart two stuck pages and found a comparatively unchewed section of Octavio's writings that he read with growing excitement. The Chinese philosopher says the adept must learn the method directly from those skilled in the art. What is written in books is only enough for beginners. The rest is kept secret and is given only in oral teaching. Above all, belief is necessary. Disbelief brings failure. Under this, Octavio had added, but as a general rule, believers are not scientists, and scientists are not believers. Where can I find someone to help me create the perfect continuoscope? There it was, although spelled a little differently, a continuoscope. And when he was thinking about moving to California, Octavio was still thinking about improving the device. Tyler wasn't certain about the rest of the passage. The dictionary told him an adept was just someone who had secret knowledge. Octavio had wanted secret knowledge, and he had also wanted help building a scientific instrument. So it was interesting, but it still told Tyler precisely nothing. OLIS hadn't led to anything either. A whole afternoon's work, and he didn't really know any more than when he'd begun. Studying, he thought sourly. Grown-ups act like it's so great, like you can do anything in life if you just study enough. Okay, I'm studying, and in my own free time. And what do I get for it? Nothing but nothing, was the obvious answer. And Colin said he really wished he could go to school like we do. You know, a real school with other kids and teachers and everything. He's homeschooled. His mom has always taught him here. Isn't that sad? No wonder he doesn't always know how to behave. Lucinda was babbling away, but Tyler was still doggedly going through the Octavio material and hardly paying attention, especially since she was babbling about Colin Needle, who Tyler thought was about as interesting as a pimple on someone's butt. He had the survey book in front of him, open to the ordinary farm pages as he made notes on a piece of binder paper. So maybe you should try being nicer to him, Lucinda finished. Maybe he could help us find out some of this stuff you're so interested in. Colin? Tyler couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want me to make friends with Junior Dr. Evil? He really seems like he needs friends, Tyler. So does a skunk. That doesn't mean I'm stupid enough to pet one. I think we're going to stop there, because now then it gets into a whole other section of stuff. Excuse me. So, that's where we are. That's where we're going to stop. I hope nobody was having a bad time with sound or anything like that. Oh, God, more weird stuff. I'll just ignore that till later. If you guys have sent me comments, I can't see them for various reasons. So I hope nobody sent me comments saying, oh, my God, we can't hear you. Or, Tad, there's a murderer behind you. Or something. By the way, that's not a murderer. That's just our slightly plump cat. Although she may harbor murderous feelings for all I know, but as long as we keep her fed, we think we're safe. Anyway, we're running out of time for tonight. I will be back at 7 p.m. This time. I mean, this weekend, 7 p.m. tomorrow, although technically it's today for a lot of you. And technically it's tomorrow is today for me now already, but for me it's, never mind. I don't have to explain. I can't help it. I am a compulsive explainer. I should have been a really boring teacher instead of being a really boring writer. I missed my calling. Anyway, we are now wrapping it up for the night. Lovely to have you join me. I will be reading at 7 p.m. and we will continue and find out what else Tyler is just about to discover, and whether Lucinda actually admits that Tyler's right and you can have a skunk that needs friends, but that doesn't mean you have to pet it. Meanwhile, I'm sure all of you have friends and family and loved ones, and take good care of them until we meet again. And take good care of yourself as well. That's very important. Self care, good stuff. But anyway, and until that point, I say thanks again for joining me and have a good day wherever in the world you may happen to be. And thank you, and I'll see you soon. Peace. Good night. Good morning.